Hello and welcome to Tuesday Folk People. My name is Maddy Leedham and I am absolutely delighted to be able to present this session as we bring to you two very extraordinary musicians. Later we're going to be talking to real-life American troubadour and former lead singer of the Groobies, Susan Gibson, but she may be most well known for her song Wide Open Spaces, that was used by the Dixie Chicks on their debut album Wide Open Spaces. But first, we're going to go to someone a little closer to home. He is from Devon, and that is his speciality, Devonian folk songs. He's been nominated for 6 BBC Radio Folk Awards, and in 2017 won the BBC Radio Folk Award for Singer of the Year. He's been described as the finest singer in his generation, and Geoff Lakeman said that he has a voice in a million. He has taken his folk songs, namely Devonian folk songs, to the television, to the radio, and has performed to audiences of up to 65,000 people. So I am absolutely delighted to welcome the wonderful Jim Causley. Hi, Jim. Thank you for joining us. It's lovely to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Are you in Devon right now?
I am, yeah.
Is it nice?
It's stopped raining.
No, so it is, yeah. Not so nice here, but well.
No. Sun would be pushing it, but yeah.
yeah, it's the UK. Right, well, I don't know if our audience know you. I'm pretty sure they will have. A very prolific musician in the folk scene, if you don't mind me saying. And maybe just to either remind them or to introduce you to them, we should have your first song, which is called Pride of the Moor. Could you tell me about this song?
Yeah, it's a song I wrote myself, and it's one I was sort of commissioned to write for, two things really. It was the anniversary of the Dartmoor Tin Mining Research Group, and which also coincided with the 10-year anniversary of the Devon and Cornwall UNESCO World Mining Heritage Landscape thing. And a local artist started this project all about celebrating the tin mining heritage of Dartmoor, and also noticed there was a bit of a gap in the way of songs about tin mining in this area, because there's loads of songs about tin mining just over the border in Cornwall, but not so much in Devon, even though Dartmoor was a big area for it, and mining other things too, like copper and other metals, and China clay too. So I was asked to write this song, and I had to learn a lot about tin mining. And because there are so many great songs already about tin mining, I tried to come at it from a different angle. And because I grew up in East Devon, and my village has quite a strong cider making and wassailing tradition, and so I thought I'd come at it from that point of view, where we go out and sing to the trees, because that's considered normal round our parts, and ask for a healthy harvest for the next year. So I thought, wouldn't it be nice if we sang to the tin and asked its permission before we beat the living daylights out of it? So that's what that song's all about.
When first you found me as dark as the night, bound up in granite, cold cassiterite, with quartz and with copper, with iron and lead, my brothers all round me lay dormant, not dead. Well, the streams of the moor, where first I was found, before wheels uncovered my load underground, a fiery dragon lights up the night sky, as a will-o'-the-wisp tells their Stanham hard by. Pride of the Moor will sing unto thee, in thanks for the treasure you've given so free. And should we have need to come find you again, we'll call and we'll listen for the cry of the tin. From black tin to white tin to ingot I be, enslaved into form, but from earth I am free. The 12-hour tide takes my tailings from me, I'm a traveller bound on the road to the sea. Well, the first town was Tavistock, the Stannaries came, then to Chagford, Ashburton and Plimpton the same. Midsummer to Michaelmas, the coinage time came, a saying if I was as pure as my name. Pride of the Moor will sing unto thee, in thanks for the treasure you've given so free. And should we have need to come find you again, we'll call and we'll listen for the cry of the tin. The millions of years lying under the land, anticipating the coming of man. With fire and stone tools in barrow and hoard, I became your fine jewellery, your shield, your sword, your bowl, your tankard, galvanised ore, and now used to solder as I did once before. Of all forms I've taken without word, without choice, like the church bells of Dartmoor that sing with my voice. Pride of the Moor will sing unto thee, in thanks for the treasure you've given so free. And should we have need to come find you again, we'll call and we'll listen for the cry of the tin. Pride of the Moor will sing unto thee, in thanks for the treasure you've given so free. And should we have need to come find you again, we'll call and we'll listen for the cry of the tin.
Thank you so much, Jim. That was absolutely brilliant. One thing that really struck me throughout was how archaic it sounds, seeing as it's something that you've written and it's modern times. I feel like the language you've used and the style that you've used, it just feels like it's old and it's been around for ages. And how do you manage to do that?
I suppose that's because I've been singing traditional songs for so long that I've just kind of absorbed that language. That's kind of what comes naturally, well, especially when I'm writing songs like that. Although there are quite a few words in it that would stick out to if you listen not too hard. Things like cassiterite is not a common word in folk song, and but yeah, generally, you could almost get away with it. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? What you sort of pick up without even thinking about it, And sometimes, like when I'm writing tunes, I think, "Oh, where have I nicked that from?" I hope it's I shouldn't have, But we're all just sort of
I think that's like the
recyclers,
eternal peril of the
exactly recycling,
like
and
all
regurgitating.
songwriters in folk. Exactly.
But that's a compliment. Thank you
But
very
that
much.
was a big. That's okay. No, that's quite a big indication of you a bit as a musician, because you've moved around a lot as a folk musician, haven't you? Like you studied in the northeast and you lived in Cornwall, but a lot of your music is Devon related. And why is that? Is that sort of a sense of identity that you feel that you need to write about Devon or sing songs of Devon?
Definitely. I mean, 'cause when I studied a degree in folk and traditional music in Newcastle, and there were fellow students there from the northeast, which has a very strong and proud tradition, and then there were other people from Scotland and Ireland and Scandinavia and Yorkshire and places, and all these people were very proud of where they're from and their musical traditions. And England, we do have that, but not such a strong degree, especially as our Celtic cousins. And so I just absorbed all of that, and I wanted to do the same with the music where I'm from. And just before I went to uni, I joined a folk choir in Exeter and learned all about our local Victorian folk song collector, Baring Gould, and all the work he did in Devon and Cornwall. And that got me really excited to find out that we have all these fantastic songs from where I grew up. So that's what ignited the passion in me, and also seeing it from other people. And I'm fascinated by how you find the universal in the local, things that apply to people all over the world, in your own backyard as well, and I think that's how you can relate to other cultures, by seeing the gold that you've got right underneath your feet.
Yeah. And it's because obviously in these places you mentioned, the northeast, Cornwall, and then they do have quite a strong tradition. And how difficult are you finding getting all of the old Devonian folk songs? Are they quite accessible, or are they quite hard to locate?
Yeah. Well, Baring Gould is the main go-to person. So he put out a book called Songs of the West, and he was one of the first of that generation of folk song collectors. He was sort of before Cecil Sharp and Vaughan Williams and all the rest, and a bit of an inspiration to those guys. And Cecil Sharp's was mainly, he worked just over the border in Somerset too, and he did pop into Devon a bit as well. So Baring Gould published his famous book Songs of the West, but it was quite heavily edited, because at that time they felt that the pure undiluted folk songs might be a bit offensive or unacceptable to the sensibilities of people at that time, especially because they weren't going back to the working class people they were collecting them from. They were going to be sung in the drawing room with a pianoforte accompaniment, you see. So they had to be nice and tasteful and above board. But what Baring Gould did, he did a very good thing, in that he left all the original copies, the versions as he collected them originally, to Plymouth Library and to the Institution in Exeter, so future generations could get hold of the original songs and see them as they were. And because he had an inkling that in the future people would be more accepting, and he was absolutely right. So there's no problem getting hold of old songs. And then a bit later, when recording came along, people were able to go out and actually record singers as well, and there was even more songs. So there's no shortage of material by any stretch.
Didn't you notice that there was a shortage of albums completely dedicated to Devonian songs?
Yeah, so that's one thing that sort of started me on my latest lockdown project, was that even though there's lots of singers that have sung Devon songs and recorded them here and there, no one had made an album specifically. And not that they need to, of course, but I just felt that would be a really nice thing to do, to get a whole load of songs and lump them under that umbrella, as I've seen people in other regions do the same thing. So that was my latest mission, and to try and make them even more accessible again. I just think that would be a
brilliant
idea thing.
Well, I think we should hear the second song now, which is Child Hunter. Could you tell us about this one before we hear it?
Child the Hunter.
Oh, Child Hunter.
Yeah. Oh. Make it sound even more dodgy than it is. And it's not about a child, it's a man by the name of Child. Well, actually, that's in medieval times, if you were a young lord who wasn't properly your lord yet, you were given the title of Child. And then it would be your surname. There's quite a famous ballad called Child Owlet, which is a similar thing from the northeast. And so this is about a chap who, in medieval times, goes hunting on Dartmoor on his horse, but then, as so often happens, the weather comes down and he gets in a spot of bother, and I won't tell you the whole story. The horse doesn't fare too well, but apparently it is a true tale, and you can still visit Child's grave if you're brave enough, up on Fox Tor Mire in the High Moors, and there's a medieval stone cross there to testify that it all took place.
Come listen all, both great and small, a tale I will you tell, that on this bleak and barren moor in ancient times befell. It so befell, as I've heard tell, there came the hunter child. All day he chased on heath and waste, on Darty moor so wild. The winds did blow, then came the snow, he chased on Foxtor. He lost his way, and so the day and winter sun expired. In darkness climbed, he could not find where his escape might gain. Long time he tried, no track espied, his labours all in vain. No shelter there upon the moor that long night to remain. With sword in hand this desperate man his own loyal steed has slain. He's plunged his sword deep in her breast, parted flesh and skin, and in the body of his good grey mare the hunter child lain in. And there with fingers dipped in blood he wrote upon the stones, "This is my will, God it fulfill, that buried be my bones." And froze together they did lay, till springtime did come around. The will he left on Foxtor Moor, all upon the rocks to be found.
Excellent, thank you, Jim. That one was very foreboding. I felt like you belong on a moor when you're listening to that, like something's going to happen. I don't know.
Yeah.
Very nicely done. Is that one that you wrote yourself?
No, that's an old ballad, medieval origin. Yeah.
And do you find that Devonian songs have a particular attribute that makes them characteristically Devonian?
Yes and no. I mean, there's in the collection, like the Bear and Ghoul did. There are songs that are found all over the country and further afield, and then there are songs that are about specific local stories, like the one we've just heard. That's a particularly a local story that happened on the moor here, and then some get localized as well. But Baron Gould and some of his collector friends that were collecting in the area did feel that that the songs of this region did have a similar to feels, particularly in the melodies, to songs from Wales. They thought the melodies sounded more like Welsh melodies than they did from the rest of England, which is quite interesting. And so there could be connections with that, and a lot of people from this region moved over to Brittany, and backwards and forwards. We've always had quite a close relationship with that part of northwest France. So who knows?
Wow. So when you write your own songs, you don't think, "Oh, I'll do that in this particular way because then it will be recognised as Devonian." I think you mentioned to me before when we had a chat, there was a band, I can't remember their name, the Pixie, I can't remember.
Dartmoor Pixie Band.
That's the one, yeah. And they've sort of almost shaped the way that the sound is now for Devonian music.
Often with any region or area, you'll get a musician or several musicians who sort of become that popular that they do kind of shape the sound, and everyone sort of tries to emulate them. And that definitely happened with Bob Cann and the Dartmoor Pixie Band. And so if I'm recording some songs, especially like there's some that have not actually been recorded before, I've tried to do it in that style, or I've intentionally done that, which can fit really well. And then in other circumstances, it depends. If I'm writing a song and it's for a particular purpose, I can do that, or I can go completely an opposite direction and go very contemporary. So It's all depends on the project.
Yeah. I feel like this is quite a big responsibility actually for you, because it's a bit like you are yourself shaping the sound of Devonian folk music, and people will hear your songs and be like, oh, well, that's classically Devonian, and then they
Maybe.
might write their own. I think that's
True.
the way that it'll go.
Well, I mean, every voice that sings a song is part of that tradition and that evolution. So
Mm.
yeah. So I
Yeah.
just like to imagine I'm just one in a line that stretches back very far and hopefully will stretch forward into the future very far as well.
Yeah. Excellent. And aren't you writing a song at the moment? I don't know if you've done it or it's a project. Something about the microbial something cider.
Mm,
It's big words.
yeah. Well, the same chap who got me to write Pride of the Moor uh, is also his latest project is about looking at um, the specifics of cider making of natural traditional cider making. So a lot of cider making, even some that claims to be traditional, they still use a lot of modern techniques these days, and whether it's chemicals or champagne yeast bought from France and things like that, as opposed to using natural yeasts that are in the farmyard. So we've
Mm.
teamed up with a farm not far from here near Tedburn, and who do make traditional farm cider. And we've composed a new wassail song, which is all about the microbial ecology of cider making. Which again, you might think the tune sounds a bit old, but the words certainly are not. I think that's one of the most things I've been asked to write. Actually, there's some really big scientific words, and it's very hard to make them sound natural in a song. But been
I can
good fun trying
imagine.
there.
Yeah, it's all very educational, your music. Brilliant. Um, I think that we should go for our third song now, which is called Honiton Lace. Could you tell us about this one?
Yep. So this is a relatively modern song written in the 1970s by a chap called Martin Graeber, who has done a lot of work on the Baring-Gould archive and also has written a wonderful book about Baring-Gould's song collecting adventures. But Martin is an excellent songwriter himself, and he was doing some work in the museum in Exeter in the 70s, and he came across some old copies of the Western Morning News, which is still one of our local regional papers. And these copies of the paper were from about 150 years before that date. And they had asked local women to write in about their day-to-day lives, and they published them like a diary. And in one of them, Martin found a piece from a Honiton lace worker, and she had written all about her day-to-day life. And he was so taken with what she wrote that he took her words and turned them into a song. And I just particularly love this song, knowing that it is the words of a real life lady. And in my ignorance, I imagined lace making was this sort of quite a genteel period drama type of thing to do, you
Mm.
know. But it was not. It was very tough, grueling work. And these women and men that worked at lace making often ended up with terrible hunchbacks because they would spend all day trying to get the best light that they could. And they often went blind, very
Yeah.
sadly, and it wasn't particularly well paid either. But anyway, the song explains it all, and it's simply called Honiton Lace.
My name is Becky Tidwell, and I'm past twice 30 years. I crave a little of your time to tell of me hopes and fears. I am a single lady, and I think it no disgrace, for my life's been spent in honest toil, a work in the Honiton lace. A cottage near to Axminster is the place that I call home. My father left it to me, and it's the one thing that I own. I rise each morning at the dawn, when the sun first shows his face, for that is when the light is best, for work in the Honiton lace. At 9 o'clock I go down to the shop and I take me work. My friends are gathered there and we can spend some time in talk. We gets paid off in tokens we can use just in that place, for their value is but 5 pence for a day at the Honiton Lace. Then Mr. Groves he gives to me a pattern for to do. Sometimes there is a harder piece that must be done by two. So me and Bridget Harvey, we sits in a window case, and we spend a pleasant day a chatting and working the Honiton Lace. Now once there was a young man who spoke kindly unto me, but he became a soldier, and he was lost in the crimey. He was me only suitor, and no one has took his place, and so never for myself I'll work a veil of the Honiton Lace. But sometimes when the night draws on, I'll let me bobbins fall, and I'll think the piece I'm working on some lady at a ball. So all you London ladies whose fine clothes are worked as grace, just you think on us Devonshire women who dressed you in your fine Honiton lace.
Really, really great, that one. I feel like it really shows the capability you have of telling a story, because even though that is from a woman's perspective, it's crazy. You kind of don't even notice that you're not a woman. not to say anything.
Actually, that's something that's quite particular to the folk scene, that maybe people who are like from a more pop music world don't quite understand, but that men sing songs from a women's point of view and vice versa, and it's not considered an issue. But if you get a pop singer doing that on the telly, it's almost like outrageous, what are you doing, which is quite sad, really, isn't it, in the 21st century?
I was going to say, when you're telling a story, I think that it's very different, because it is like you're saying the words of this other person. You aren't the other person, but you're just telling their story, and it really comes across in that. So really great, thank you. We don't have loads of time, but there's one thing that I really want to touch on. I mean, your whole career, you've done loads that we can't look at, like your time on the radio, all of the awards, the festivals, Hyde Park, but we haven't got time for all of that. So one thing I thought that would be really nice to talk about is Charles Causley, the poet, and your relative. You've done a project to do with him, haven't you? I was wondering if you could just tell us a bit about that.
Okay, well, I'm a relative of the Cornish poet Charles Causley, who lived just over the border in Launceston, and in 2013 I was given the opportunity to actually go into his small cottage in his hometown and record an album of his poems that I'd set to music, and I got to use his own piano as well, and we used his house as a makeshift recording studio, and so it was very exciting and very magical and moving, really, to do that. And I sadly never got to meet him, just missed each other, really. But he was a school teacher in his hometown, but before that he was in the Navy in the Second World War, and he never married, but he lived with his mum all of his life until she passed away. Yes, he was a very respected poet in his day, and he was a bit folky too. He liked folk and traditional music, and you can see that in a lot of his poems. And he writes in the ballad meter, which makes it very easy for people like me to set some of them to music. Not all of them, but some of them work very nicely to music. And since then, I was asked to do another project focusing on his poems for children as well. So I've done a children's album, which is really good fun, and it's good fun for big kids too.
Well, I think that it's brilliant, because he is your relative, and as you say, you missed him, but you're still managing to honour him in a way that I imagine he'd really like. I don't want to speak for him, but if his poetry was quite folky, to then have it set to tunes, it's really nice. That's what I can say.
I hope so.
But I think from this session, you've really shown us different ways that you can do things with folk music. So you've shown us the songwriting side, starting from scratch, then obviously arranging traditional songs, but also setting songs to poetry, which I know is quite predominant in folk music, and in like the classical interpretation of folk music. I think it's quite common. So thank you so much for talking to us. We are running low on time, sadly. But yeah, thank you very, very much. It's been really interesting.
Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. So we've got our last song now, which is Old Uncle White Way. Can you tell us about this before we hear it?
Yeah, well, I mentioned earlier I'm from a cider making and wasselling part of the county. Well, I say a lot of the county has had cider making once upon a time, but Wimpole is my home village, and Wimpole was the home of White Way cider, which was very famous back in the day. And so this is a song that Baring Gould collected in Wimpole. It's called Old Uncle White Way, and it's just a light-hearted song about people's love of cider, basically.
In a nice little village not far from the sea still lives my old uncle, aged 83. Of orchards and meadows he owns a good lot, such cider as his not another has got. So fill up the jug, boys, let it go round. Of drinks none the equal in England is found. So pass the jug round, me boys, pull out it free. There's nothing like cider, sweet cider for me. My uncle, he's lusty, he's nimble and spry, with his red rosy cheeks and his sparkling eye. His head snowy white as the flower in May, and he drinks only cider by night and by day. So fill up the jug, boys, let it go round. Of drinks none the equal in England is found. So pass the jug round, me boys, pull out it free. There's nothing like cider, sweet cider for me. O'er the wall of the churchyard the apple trees lean, and ripen their burdens red, golden and green. In autumn the apples among the graves lie. There I'll sleep well, says uncle, when fated to die. And fill up the jug, boys, let it go round. Of drinks none the equal in England is found. So pass the jug round, me boys, pull out it free. There's nothing like cider, sweet cider for me. My heart like an apple, sound juicy as been. My limbs and my trunk have been sturdy and clean. Uncankered I've thrived in heart and in head. So it's under them apple trees lay me when I'm dead. And fill up the jug, boys, let it go round. Of drinks none the equal in England is found. So pass the jug round, me boys, pull out it free. There's nothing like cider, sweet cider for me. Pass the jug round, me boys, pull out it free. There's nothing like cider, sweet cider for me.
Thank you so much, Jim. That was absolutely fantastic. A real pleasure to speak to you. But we must move on to our second half of the evening, where we're going to talk to the fantastic singer-songwriter, Susan Gibson. Welcome, Susan. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Where are you tuning in from?
So I am in Kalispell, Montana. It's a town, it's probably maybe an hour from the Canadian border. And I'm actually at my cousin's house the first time we talked, I was at our cabin, but there's been a fire that has happened at our cabin. So it's like, it's a couple miles from where we're at, but I decided to get on out of there.
Yeah, good idea. A bit of
Yeah.
drama before the pre-record.
Drama,
Excellent. Well, I mean, our audience might not know, but I'm exceptionally excited for this one because you have written a song that I grew up with, and it's been a massive part of my musical early memories and things. And that is Wide Open Spaces, that was covered by the Dixie Chicks, or the Chicks as they are now. So I'm so excited to talk about that, and we're going to go in depth on that a bit later in the interview. But I think that we should begin with a song so that everybody can hear you and get to know your music. And this one is Secondhand. Could you tell us a bit about this?
Sure. This song is one that I wrote. I had a car wreck in 2010, and I broke my arm, wrecked my touring vehicle that I'm sitting in now, and broke my arm. And, that was such an identity crisis because I hadn't really worked on any other part of my life than touring around playing songs. And so when I had several months there where I wasn't able to play, it really was a kind of a crisis, internal crisis. And that the little guitar figure that's at the beginning of that song is just a D chord for you guitar players out there. It's just a D chord, but it has a little movement in there. And that was one of the first things I got back after I got my cast off my arm, and I was doing so musically that was a big moment for me to be able to play guitar again. Yeah. And then as far as lyrically goes, that song is kind of about being right in the moment that you're in. And so it's, the chorus, the landing place for the chorus is God is in the second hand. So if I'm measuring, things in calendar pages, probably I'm not going to be very happy. But when I can narrow it down to the second hand and be in that moment, then probably I'll be okay. So that's that song.
It was a slow and steady death. That's the trouble with my free will. It leaves me gasping for my last breath. How I procrastinate. I could always let it slide. I hope it isn't too late to change course before it all collides. Hold a hand out, toss out a few seeds. Stop trying to figure out which birds I'm gonna feed. Already living in the promised land. The clock is ticking, God is in the second hand.
That is absolutely amazing. Thank you, Susan. I actually feel like when you sing in your songs, they're so sincere, and it
Mm.
feels not like you're trying to perform them to an audience, but it feels like you're talking directly to me or to
Mm.
the person, depending on the song, to the person that it's directed at. It just feels like authentic. That's the word.
Mm.
It's not in any way put on, and that's something that I really love about your music. I think you can
Thank
hear that
you.
in that one. Not a problem.
Thank you. That's the goal. That I think for me in my writing, that's the goal is to connect, and um, I think I think it's a real challenge to try to have broad appeal yet specific connection with individual people, not demographics, right? But people. And I love playing, and I play small shows, and so this one-on-one connection is a little bit easier in a crowd of 50 than it is in a crowd of 500.
Well, that's what I was actually about to talk about, because you said previously to me that you are a performer who performs in the nooks and crannies
Mm.
of places, which I really loved as a concept. And so it's a case, isn't it, of you going into these small areas. And is that purely just so that you can feel that connection? Is that why you do it?
It I Mostly why. When I went from being in a band to being a solo performer, there were certain venues that became out of reach for me, right? They wanted a full band, a full sound, the whole thing. And so there were a certain amount of venues that kind of dropped off for me. And then it was a matter of how do I fill that space that's open in my calendar now because I'm not traveling with the whole band. And that was when I got introduced to house concerts. And house concerts, you're probably familiar, but if your listeners aren't, it's where private people open their home to 30 to 50 to, if maybe they have a big backyard, we'll have 100 people. And they're in they're curating their artists that they have come through, and they're curating their audience members. And it really expanded my ability to tour, because not only was the money better, when you're playing to 50 people and they're all putting a $20 bill in the jar and then buying CDs because they're invested, because you just had a potluck supper with each other. So the connections were a little tighter. The house concert setup. Are you aware now that, remember when you asked me a question and then I talked for 11 minutes, but they'll have a potluck dinner, and so we all eat supper together, or we have pie and coffee. It's very civilized.
Yeah.
And then these folks, they'll come to this concert and they may or may not know me, but it doesn't matter. They know they like the people that this house concert runner brings to the shows. And so you can really expand in a good way and connect in a real way,
Yeah. Do
and
you not
so
really have dreams of being up on like the big stages? I don't know, in the UK that would be like singing in Wembley or something, something
yeah.
like that. So do you not have that desire?
Yeah, I do. I like being on a big stage. I don't think I'd want to live there. I think it's a nice place to visit, but I don't think I'd want to live there, because I just think that's just in my personality to feel. And when I think about it, and if I'm honest, it might be a little bit of a big fish small pond mentality, because it's really fun to have every single person have their focus, and maybe that feels more manageable with smaller crowds.
Yeah.
um, I know I like playing on a stage where it's big sound and big lights. If I had a band with me where at least I have some people close to me, that I can play with. I've gotten to do some good sized folk festivals where, you're really only seeing the first 10 rows of people, you know? And what I find is that I'm just looking at the people that I can see. I'm not really taking in the big, big crowd. And so it feels like even when I am in a moment like that where I'm on a big stage, I'm still, just getting the people in my focus. But it's
Yeah.
fun to play on a big stage with, sound and lights, and it's, it
Yeah.
that's fun too.
Yeah, and that must obviously fit into that lifestyle of being in the nooks and crannies, is being able to just drive to these places low key and kind of staying at them. It really fits with that whole troubadour image, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. You know what? It feels very self-contained. And so even when you're touring, you are at the mercy of the kindness of strangers, right? You're kind of out there floating, and you plan as much as you can, and then you really do depend on people you don't know to make it work, And so there's a lot of that. And then sometimes, I need to retreat from that. And so I mean, I really feel like it's a luxury to be able to travel like this, where I have my space if I need to have my space, which I do. I love people, but I recharge by myself.
Mm.
And so thankfully there's long drives in between gigs, and I get a chance to just kind of recharge, and then I can go and be with people, and it works out really great. But having this little pod, where I can keep my phone and my computer charged, and I can take a nap if I need to, and I can sit in here and write songs, in the car. It's great.
Perfect. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that is kind of the dream. Well, for me anyway, is to be able to like tour around, do music, but be completely self-sufficient in your own little home.
Yeah.
But anyway, in the conscience, or I'm not sure of the word, of time, I'm gonna now talk about something that is in no way a nook or a cranny, and that is your song "Wide Open Spaces" that was
Mm.
covered by the Chicks.
Hmm.
And I want us to hear it, your own version, now before we talk about it. So we actually have this for our audience. Before we hear it, I'm sure everyone already has heard it before. I think that you'd have to live under a rock to not have heard the Chicks version. But what was this song for you? Why did you write it?
I wrote this song my first Christmas vacation home from college. I'd gone to school in Montana and was visiting my parents back in Amarillo, so back in my hometown. And it really was a more of like an imploring to, no matter, we kind of talked about this, no matter how old you are, you're still your parents' kid. And so I was in that gap between adulthood and really having some responsibility for myself, and still having the safety net of my parents. And so this song happened in that moment. And for me, this song was a, autobiographical um, kind of way to tell my parents that I was ready to grow up, right? I think we kind of talked about it, how if I would have said what I was really thinking to my mom, like, "Hey, I'm an adult now. You don't need to keep track of me anymore," that would have hurt her feelings. But I was so early in my writing that I was really using it therapeutically, as I do now, a way to work out my thoughts without hurting somebody's feelings. And that's what that song was for me. And it evolved into this completely different thing once Natalie and Emily and Marty got a hold of it, and it became an anthem, when they sang it. So it was really fun to see that happen.
Who doesn't know what I'm talking about? Who's never left home? Who's never struck out to find a dream and a life of their own? A place in the clouds, a foundation young girl's dreams no longer hollow. It takes the shape of a place out west. What it holds for her, she hasn't yet guessed. She needs wide open spaces, room to make her big mistakes. She needs new faces. She knows the high stakes. She travels this road as a child, wide-eyed and grinning, she never tired. But now she won't be coming back with the rest. If these are life's lessons, she'll take this test. She needed wide open spaces, room to make her big mistakes. She needs new faces. She knows the high stakes. She knows the high stakes. She knows the high. Na 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 na. As she packs her things, she feels she left something out. Her friends, her family, her dog, and this house. She turns around to find her own room there. Looks at the U-Haul, it has to fit in there. And as her folks drive away, her dad yells, check the oil. Mom stares out the window, she says, I'm leaving my girl. She said it did not seem like that long ago, when she stood there and watched her own folks go. She needed wide open spaces, room to make her big mistakes. She needs new faces. She knows the high stakes. She knows the high stakes. She knows the high.
I have to say that hearing that, the bare bones of it, the roots of the song, it was really quite an emotional experience for me when I first heard it from your singing, just because obviously the Chicks, they do such an amazing version, but there was the meaning behind it. You wrote that, and it's come from you. I think you said previously that it's quite autobiographical, and you can really tell when you sing that. And I wanted to ask, do you think that the Chicks did the song justice?
Oh, 1,000 times over. I mean, I think one of the biggest compliments that I get is when people say, "Oh, you wrote that? We thought the Chicks wrote that." Because the way they deliver it is so honest, and it's so natural coming from them. And when the more you get to know about them and their career and their personalities and stuff like that, it's just it just feels really good to have. I love that song. I love that song, but it really did take their voices, their reach, their altitude of their artistry, to make that into what it was. And I've said this quite a bit, that song would not have done what it did as far in terms of reach and even in terms of sales if it wasn't that artist, the Chicks, at that moment in time, because that was the late 90s, it was 98. And so people were still buying whole albums instead of downloading singles, or and it was everywhere on the radio. It was number one on the country charts for 4 weeks in a row, which gave a lot of people the opportunity to hear it. And
Yeah.
now, with the way music is, we can so cherry pick what our taste is, that some of those hits that are happening today, they're not reaching the same as they did in the 90s, when we were all listening to the same 500 country stations in the United States.
Now, with that song, you were taken to the Grammys, and obviously it was a massive success. It's what they named their debut album after and everything.
Yeah.
But do you find that it's a gift that keeps on giving even to this day?
Oh, for 100%. I mean, the reason why I was able to survive the pandemic without working for a year is that song,
Yeah.
because I'm still getting royalties off of that song. I think, and this year that has been a huge gift, especially even getting back to work, and getting to be a little bit more discerning about how I work, because of that song, has been great. But I don't think that's even been the biggest gift of this song. As an independent artist that doesn't have a record label or a big publishing company, having a song like that on my resume, that immediately recognizable and memorable song attachment, has been huge for my career. But that's not even the biggest gift. The first time we talked about you hearing that song when you were growing up, and knowing that you and I have this connection through this song, long before we ever meet. This can be a pretty lonesome business, right? I'm in a van by myself 23 hours of the day, or 22 hours of the day, or when I'm traveling, when I'm working. And it can be kind of isolating, and writing is kind of a solitary, thing to do. And so to have this thing out there that feels like it belongs to whoever loves it, and that it connects me to people I may or may not ever meet, is probably the biggest gift of this song, of just having that idea that when I met a gal that, like, I knew her for a couple of months, and we met through other friends, and knew her for a couple months, and she didn't know anything about the song, right? And so we were just friends, and then she learned about the song, and she was kind of having a hard time, and I was like, look, we were connected long before we ever met. There's just this kind of destiny feel about it, of having connections that you don't even know about. And it makes me more sympathetic to my fellow humans, and a little more empathic, and you know what I mean? Like, we're not all strangers, because I've
Yeah.
got this weird connection to people that we don't even know about yet. I think it makes me a nicer person,
Yeah.
right? Because it makes me a little more loving and tolerant of people, because if they've, no matter what they think, if they've enjoyed that song, or heard that song, or that song has a place in their, life's soundtrack, then we already have a connection, and then it's just up to, time and space to get to meet those people. So that's kind of the biggest gift, is just a feeling of
Yeah.
belonging in the world.
Brilliant. Well, I think that is the best gift that a song can give you.
Yeah.
We must hear your third song now,
Okay.
which is, where's it gone? Compassionate Combat.
Mm.
Can you tell us about this one?
Yeah, this was a cool song. It's probably my most recent. It absolutely is my most recent song that I've recorded. Kind of recorded it as a single. It was written as a part of a project. There's a nonprofit out there run by my friend Carolyn Phillips called Songs for the Soul, and the premise of that program is to pair songwriters with oncology nurses and nurses that have long-term care, hospice nurses and oncology nurses, because what we know is that, we are exhausting our medical care people now more than ever. But it's always been a thing where they don't necessarily, they take care of everybody else first and themselves last. And so there's a thing called compassion fatigue that people get when they are long-term caregivers, and they're, ignoring every sign that says, hey, you better take a break or you better slow down. And so that was the original basis for this program. And when COVID hit and we were really leaning hard on our medical care people, she invited a whole bunch of songwriters to write songs specifically for these people. And she told me this story about her niece who was working in a nursing home, senior nursing home facility, and that the people of the town had brought their like mobile home trailers to park in the lot of the nursing home because we didn't know enough about the virus. And so they weren't able to go home. So they brought these trailers up so that they could kind of go and regroup. And it was just a powerful story. And then all the stories about the selflessness of our health professionals, has been amazing. And so that kind of came out as a thank you. It was supposed to be, this song of gratitude for these people that are putting themselves right. They're in the war zone. They're on the front line,
You're used to giving. Did you hear a call? Or were you driven to service for your whole life? Do you put yourself in danger? Do you risk it all to help a stranger? Well, the nurses, they don't think twice. And we ask so much of you. Leave your families and your homes for the work you gotta do. You are the miracle, the gift, pulling 18-hour shifts of compassionate combat. How do you thank someone for that? You get to your task, an angel in a homemade mask. You got your picture taped on your gown. Machines for ventilation. Human beings need more than medication, and there's no sign of slowing down. And we ask so much of you. You are a marvelous machine. You got your bedside manners too. You are the miracle, the gift, pulling 20-hour shifts of compassionate combat. How do you thank someone for that? Out there on the front lines, can you feel that we're behind you? We'll take every opportunity we can just to remind you that we see you and we love you and we need you. So thank you. And we're gonna ask too much of you. Hold our hands as we let go, or hang on and pull us through. You are the miracle, the gift, in every single shift of compassionate combat. And you can thank a nurse for that.
absolutely love that song. I feel like you've managed to put into words what a lot of people were feeling, especially during the height of the pandemic. That,
Yeah.
I don't know, I think that a lot of people felt voiceless to show their gratitude. And I think that
Mm.
you've really managed to encapsulate that. So
Mm.
thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
And with your songwriting, is that the kind of like thing that you'll go down? Do you try to write things that are relatable to people?
I do want to write things that are relatable to people. You know, the way I got into songwriting was really therapeutic, um, processing things in a way, and for some reason that format of writing songs works with the way I like to process things that I may or may not understand. And so or things that I'm struggling with. So I always think I am my first audience. And so I'm writing for clarity and maybe resolution on an issue for myself. But the goal is always to connect. And so a song that might start out really internalized um, and the interesting thing that I have found is it's the opposite of what I would think. I would think that I need to write in more general and broad terms in order to relate to more people. And what I feel like I have found from 20 years of writing and also getting to play those songs for people that I get to talk to and hear what resonates with them, like at the merchandise table where they come up and say that line where you said blah blah blah, and I get to hear specific things from people about what they connected to in a song. That the
A
more
bit like
specific
check
that I
the
get,
oil in
yeah,
wide
like the
open
check the oil
spaces.
line.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one that's the line that I thought was too specific because of course I did not understand that that's how dads make sure their daughters are okay, is to keep their car running,
Yeah.
right? They don't want you to get stranded somewhere. And so um that's a great example that they that if I can really get specific about things, that's going to have a better chance. It may not relate to more people, but more people are going to relate to it more, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And so I might write a song and the first draft is for me, and then I have to figure out how to go back and make that be, something that I would sing to somebody that they could get something out of, you know. Um and a lot of times it's all I'm trying to get the same thing out of it as somebody else is. So it's not like it's a big clunky process or anything. It's just it's just I want to always consider my listener. If I'm going to play that song in
Yeah.
public, I always must consider my listener and make the
Yeah.
goal to connect.
Well, I think that you definitely achieved that based on what we've heard today. And
Thank
I mean, you've released 6 albums, but it's no easy feat. So I think
you.
that you've clearly mastered something, and you
Mm,
have found that tap of relating to people. And I think it's
mm.
absolutely wonderful. We're running extremely low on time,
Okay.
unfortunately. So we're going to have to go into your final song.
Yeah.
But I wish that we had loads more time to just discuss it. It's so interesting to talk to you, and
Thank you.
obviously there's just a lot more to explore. But just before we hear this, I just want to say a huge thank you for joining us. I mean, I
Thank you.
am honoured to have been able to speak to you, and I'm sure that our audience here at Home Stage are thrilled to be able to speak to someone who's really, I know you don't think you've mastered it, but I think you have mastered the art of songwriting. So
Oh, thank
thank you.
thank
And
you.
on to our final song, The Big Game.
Mm.
I've tried every single word in the book, like love and hate, like now and wait. Anything to get you on that hook. It's not a trap, just 'cause it's bait. Maybe I need a Webster's dictionary something to expand my vocabulary. I got a million tricks up my sleeve, my sleight of hand, don't need no wedding band. Anything to make you believe the smoke and mirrors, they ain't contraband. Maybe I need some tips from Penn and Teller, or the spell to turn me into Cinderella. But I want my way with you. Do what I want you to. Why you gotta make it so hard for me to be easy? You got me holding out a little hope, your saltwater smile, you little crocodile. You're in the crosshairs of my scope. I've been holding my breath for quite a little while. I tend to shoot before I aim. Maybe I wasn't cut out for the big game, but I want my way with you. Do what I want you to. Why you gotta make it so hard for me to be easy? I need a little dignity, I need a little grace, just a little bit of grace. But the only thing I know of love is the thrill of the chase. It's the biggest move I have. Do what I want you to. Why you gotta make it so hard for me to be easy?
Thank you so much, Susan. I feel like I'm having a bit of a fangirl moment here. I can't tell you how much of a privilege it was to speak to you. And of course, to talk to the wonderful Jim Causley. It's been a real honour to speak to you both. Please do keep up with all Tuesday Folk People events by signing up to our mailing list or keeping an eye on our social media. You really don't want to miss it. We're meeting all these wonderful people. So see you all in 2 weeks' time.